and welcome to this week's IG Live. We are talking today to Stefanie Foster Brown. She is also the one doing our giveaway this week, so if you haven't entered yet, be sure to do so. We are giving away a copy of her new book, which is my Heart Speaks Kriolu. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. Hello. But enter because the giveaway ends tonight at midnight Eastern time, so you don't want to miss that. So be sure to do that as soon as you finish watching. Go enter for a chance to win My Heart Speaks Kriolu. We're going to be talking to her all about her book, which is so sweet. Hi.
Hi, Leota.
How are you?
Good, thanks.
Good. Thank you for being on here with us today. I was just mentioning your book, but before we get started talking about it, it is such a sweet book. But why don't you introduce yourself for those that don't know you and tell us what was your journey to becoming an author?
Sure. My name is Stefanie Foster Brown. I'm a debut author as of last month. My first book just came out, My Heart Speaks Kriolu. And I was a school psychologist. And during the pandemic, I think I was always one of those people that was like, someday I'm going to write a children's book. And I kept saying, someday. And during the pandemic, I was at home, partly doing my job and partly at home doing nothing. And I took it as an opportunity to start working towards that goal. I took some classes and I put together a few manuscripts, and I was really fortunate that my journey was pretty quick after that. I was able to get an agent and sold my book a few months after that. And yeah, it's been a wild, fun ride.
That's great. And I know you have a number of other books that are going to be coming out soon, so we can talk about that at the end. But that's exciting that you just started and you already have so many books that are coming out. But if we want to talk about your first book, well, actually, sorry, to back up a second, I'm curious because I saw that, like as you mentioned, you're a school psychologist and you would often use books when you were working with students. So you saw firsthand what wonderful tools books and stories can be. How can books like yours help kids see their best selves and for themselves and also to understand others better?
Sure. So I got some really good first-hand experience with that. As a school psychologist, you get a very limited amount of time to work with students. They're between classes, they're going to specials, and they have a lot to do during the school day. And so your time with them is pretty brief. I'd say I'd maybe get like at most 20 to 30 minutes with a student at a time.
Wow.
And that's hard to do sometimes pretty heavy work. I had kids who had a parent who was incarcerated or different addiction issues in their homes, and they were coming to school with this. And I needed a really quick way to kind of help them to process these different issues that were coming up in the school. And books were such a safe and removed tool to use because I'm not talking directly about you, but we're talking about a student who's having similar issues as you, and it just allows students almost a freedom to explore those topics more and to problem solve and to think of what they would do in that child's shoes when they're actually in the same shoes. So I think books are amazing for that. My book specifically, I think at its core is really about having a sense of a belonging, which is something I think it's part of the human experience that we need a sense of belonging, whether you're a child or an adult. And I think my book, I hope it kind of broadens the definition of what it means to belong and maybe takes away some of the criteria too. I think sometimes criteria can be self-imposed and sometimes by others, by people in our group. But I hope it just kind of broadens the definition of belonging and helps people to accept others and themselves a little more.
I love that. Well, tell us about the book and what was your inspiration for writing it?
Sure. So my book is about a young girl and her relationship with her grandfather. My inspiration for writing it was my own family, my grandfather. I come from a Cape Verdean American family on my mother's side. I'm fourth generation here. My family's been here probably over 100 years, but I still very much feel cultural pieces of where my family, my place of origin, my family's place of origin. And so my grandfather, just just a wonderful human being. He really kind and compassionate. He was a gifted athlete and kind of a celebrated member of his community. But he lost his vision when he was in his 40s, and
Mm.
it was a pretty quick decline. He could no longer drive. He lost his license, and my grandmother went to work while he stayed home with the kids. And so that's the grandfather I met. He was legally blind by the time I was born, and most of my time with my grandfather was spent walking because we couldn't drive places. So we were just exploring the neighborhood. We were taking in the world around us with all our senses. Um, so my book is about language loss and what happens to your cultural identity when you don't necessarily speak the language that your family comes from. My grandfather spoke a little bit of Kriolu. Kriolu is the language that comes from Cabo Verde. Cabo Verde is a collection of 10 islands off the coast of Senegal, West Africa. And my grandfather spoke a little bit. His father spoke more. And then as you move down the generations, we spoke less and less. And I have very few words, none of them which are appropriate for KidLit. So, and I'm actually taking classes to learn Kriolu, but I wrote a book about um, wanting to have that sense of cultural belonging and what to do when you don't speak the language. And I think my grandfather is really instrumental in modeling what that looks like for me because he taught me how to take in the world with all my senses. We're trying foods, we were listening to music, we were using our senses to really connect with what was around us.
Yeah, and it's funny because this book, in some ways, is about mindfulness. Because, like you said, you're
Yeah.
using all of your senses, um, and it's interesting. So, as you mentioned, the girl in the story, she feels some out of place sometimes because she doesn't have much knowledge of the language, and yet she finds other ways to connect to her culture. As you mentioned, can you talk a little more about that?
About how she connects with her culture.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I think a few different ways. I mentioned food. Food has always been a really big part of my household, and then I feel like that's probably the biggest connection back to Cape Verdean culture for me, and for this character. And food, music, and music is a really special one. It kind of transcends the physical environment around her, and she's able to just experience her culture through the rhythm that's
Right.
she's hearing, but also that's inside of her.
Mm. I love that, and as you say, it kind of expands our idea of what it means to belong to a culture and be connected. And it seems like language is one of the first things that goes because it's a lot harder, and
It's,
harder to maintain. And I'm also curious because usually when we talk about immigrant stories, we're talking about first or second generation immigrants, and the girl in the story, as with yourself, is fourth generation. Um, and yet those cultural ties are still alive, even though things like language might fade. So what do you want people to understand about the deep roots that culture has in immigrant families, even over the generations?
Yeah, no, I think I love that question. I think culture stays inside of us. I said my family came here some over 100 years ago, but I still see the remnants of a place that I didn't get to until my 20s. I can give you an example from my home. So I identify as a Black American woman. My husband identifies as Black American as well. But when we got married, I don't think it was until then that I realized that my Black American experience was so different than his.
Mm.
And in a lot of ways, we had a bicultural household. And that was because of the Cape Verdean influence in my family. We were eating different foods, we were listening to different types of music, even the expressions and the sayings we use, they stayed with us. So I think culture has a very long lasting impact.
And I'm curious, did you have the experience like the girl in the book that there were others in the community from that same culture? Because I know there are a few times in the book where you run into someone who is speaking Creole with the father, excuse me, the grandfather. So was that your experience as well?
Yes. So most of the Kriolu speakers that I ran into as a child were my elders, from maybe like my grandparents' age or older. And unfortunately, as they passed away, we're losing that language.
Right.
But yes, in the community where my grandfather lived, it was very much a Cape Verdean kind of enclave, with lots of Cape Verdean restaurants and a big community there. I did not grow up in the same community. I grew up in Connecticut, maybe about 2 hours away. So most of my experiences with the Cape Breton community were visiting over the summer or holidays.
Right. Well, speaking of elders, I mean, this book is about immigrant experience, but it's also about this special relationship she has with her grandfather. What's so special about that kind of relationship that you wanted to highlight in the book?
Sure. I think grandparents, from what I can tell, they have a
Mhm.
very awesome role. I have an experience as a mom. I have two teen girls, and I think when you're a parent, you're constantly kind of you have an agenda. You have to have an agenda because you have to make sure you're raising good human beings and that they have a moral compass and that they're working hard and contributing to the world. And I think with grandparents, there's this kind of built-in, you use the word mindfulness, a built-in mindfulness because it's more experiential. You're able to just um, kind of take in the world around you. Your agenda is fun and love and nurture, and I think that's so special and just creates for a really cool dynamic with grandparents.
Right. And especially when you're talking about immigrant families, it seems like there's that added layer that they are have a closer connection maybe to the culture, because he still did speak the language, that there's some kind of transmission there that maybe doesn't come as much from the parents, would you say?
Yeah, I think each generation, the older the generation, the little closer experience. Not even closer, I'd say different. They have a different
Mhm.
experience.
Yeah.
Um, if you, my grandfather spoke Kriolu a little bit. His parents spoke more, so that would create a different dynamic in his household, and in their time of arrival. But yeah, I think grandparents do. They're kind of like I won't say gatekeepers, but they hold something
Mm.
important that has to do with our heritage and where we come from.
As you mentioned, the book a lot about the realizing the true meaning of home, realizing it's a lot about belonging. What do you hope that readers take away from this book?
Yeah, I think home is not always a place. Sometimes it's in the people we love and how they care for us. But home is sometimes right inside of us. In my author's note in my book, I talked about an experience where my first time going back to the Cape Verde Islands, I was really cool and just probably one of the deepest cultural experiences I've ever had. But I had this moment where a stranger looked at my face and she said, "You're from this island." There are 10 different islands in the Cape
Mm.
Verde Islands, and she knew exactly where I was from. And
Mhm.
I'm fourth generation removed, but still she can pinpoint just by looking at me of what
Right.
island I came from. So we carry home within us, even if we haven't been to home per se.
Right. Right. And what kind of response have you gotten from readers? I know it hasn't been out in the world that long, so
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know how much you've had a chance to talk with readers about it.
So far, really good. I've taken it to the Cape Verdean community in New Bedford where it takes place, and that's been really fun just to hear old stories and even people who knew my grandfather and hear how they relate to the book. But I think probably one of the most meaningful experiences I've had with the book so far and sharing it is talking cross-culturally to people from other
Mhm.
cultures and people coming to tell me, "Oh, I had such a close relation to my grandparents and maybe I don't speak my language from home, or maybe I'm raising kids who I worry they don't speak the language of our family. But it's okay because I feel like there are other ways that we can transmit culture too. Not that language is not important to champion and to keep alive, but there are lots of ways that we transmit culture. And I think coming to that revelation it's nice to hear people talk about the same topic in different cultures.
Yeah, that must be interesting because especially like we've talked about being fourth generation or depending on where your family comes from, like there's I mean, the Cape Verde Islands, it seems like that's so far away that there's a really good chance, like the girl in the book, she's never been there before. Whereas maybe if a family is from somewhere closer by, like say Mexico, maybe they do have a chance to go back. So it must be interesting to hear kind of different people's stories about that.
It is, yeah, so many different stories. Yeah, it's been fun. I think uh, I hear a lot of times as a writer, the more specific you can be, the more universal it becomes. And I feel like I went pretty specific here. A
Yeah.
lot of times people are afraid to even say the title of the book because it uses the word Kriolu, which they don't know how to pronounce, and that's fine. But as I read, I think they realize, hey, this is a story that there's some universality here, and that's cool to hear.
Yeah, I love the artwork in the book because I think as you say, even if people don't relate to the specific culture, just especially that link with the cover is so beautiful of her and her grandfather that I think that really comes through.
Yeah, Keisha Morris did an amazing job. I know she took a lot of inspiration from her relationship with her own grandfather.
Mm.
And I believe the grandfather character might even be based on her grandfather. But you can just see so much love that she poured into it. You can see there's a personal connection there.
Well, do you want to take a little time to talk about your other books that are coming out? Because I know you have a number of them that are going to be coming out in the next. I don't. Are they all in 2026, or is it kind of an?
Kind of scattered. So I have a free year in 2026, which is nice because I get to just kind of spend some time with Kriolu. But then in 2027, I have two more books. One is kind of like a magic realism book, which was a lot of fun to write. But it's about transitions and change. The next one is about a sister relationship. I do a lot of writing about family relationships and just connecting with our communities. And then I felt like I needed to write a book about inspired by my grandmother as well. So I have that coming out in 2028, as well as a nonfiction book about a little known artist, C.E. Porter, who came from Connecticut, who's a still life painter. So yeah, kind of all over the gamut, but always kind of focused. I think I'm coming up with a theme of just New England, family. Yeah.
How was your experience switching to writing, say, like nonfiction or the magical realism, like trying out these different genres?
It's kind of like trying on hats, trying on outfits. I enjoyed it, and especially the nonfiction one. I didn't know if I would enjoy it, but I think a lot of writing picture books has to do with kind of waiting for inspiration. And I feel like it's either there or not. And so in the meantime, it was really nice to just have a research project that I could dig into, and I enjoyed it a whole lot more than I expected. Yeah.
And was he someone that you had been familiar with before? Because to be honest, I hadn't heard of him.
Yeah. So I hadn't either until a few years ago. I stumbled across C.E. Porter at a museum, a local museum. Um, he's he was the one of the only still life painters in the 18th century, and sorry, 19th century, but he's not that well known, but he's becoming increasingly well known. He has work in the Met and all over the world at this point, but I walked into this museum, and the person who was giving me the tour said, "Oh, this is a Connecticut artist, Black American, who is a freedman, and he was a prolific painter. And his paintings were gorgeous." And I was just so shocked. I grew up in Connecticut, and I had never heard his name before, and I just kind of fell down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, it's perfect subject, right?
Yeah, totally.
Well, speaking of, I mean, as you mentioned, you're writing in different genres, different subjects, but one of the things I noticed is you say you always write about family, connection, and love, always love. Why is that so important to you?
I think there's an absence of love right now in our world. I came across a sign the other day at a store that said something that resonated with me, something along the lines of "You are responsible for the energy you bring into this place." And I feel like as creators, creators are responsible for what they're putting into the world, and I feel like love is probably the safest, healthiest bet right now. So I stick with love. Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, thank you for taking the time to talk with us today. As I mentioned, I did have a chance to read the book, and it's so beautiful, and I'm excited about the other ones that you have coming out. They all sound so interesting. So,
Thank you.
yeah,
Yeah,
thank you
thank
for
you so much
taking
for
the time.
having me. Thank you for your time.
And for anybody watching, if you joined us late, the whole thing will be up in a few minutes on Instagram, and later it'll be on our YouTube channel. And if you haven't entered our giveaway yet, today is the last day. So go ahead and go do that. It only takes a few minutes. It's very easy. It's in our pinned post here on the Instagram. So you can just go ahead and take care of that really quick. Such a pleasure to talk with you. Thank you for joining us.
You too. Thank you.
And thanks to all of you. We'll see you again next week. Bye.
Bye.